Hey guys, I'm really glad to see you all here. My name is Juriy Bura. I work for EPAM Systems. I currently live in Shenzhen, China, and well, I do JavaScript, HTML5, and I really love those stack of technologies. I mean, I really fell in love with it when I first started to work with it. It was back in 2008 when I started to switch from Java to some HTML5, then more HTML5, less Java, then almost no Java, almost all HTML5, and so on. And basically, I started from building the single web page app. Basically, I was working with a framework intended to build single page web apps, and in that time, the framework called Windows, it supported single-page web apps up to Internet Explorer 6 with all possible compatibilities, all possible code hacks to support the old browsers. And in that time, if I were to present a speech about a single-page app, I would rather make a speech, why would you do a single-page app? What's the reason to do it? Like, why? Why do you need it? Why all that trouble in your head to build a single web page application? We have like 15 years of experience already building server-side rendering with JSP. It works like a charm. Why switch? Okay, but today, like, please raise your hand for the sake of statistic. Who does single page apps somewhere on the world? Okay, super. So quite a lot of people here, and we're also doing single page apps. And for our case, for our work, we have built quite a nice application. Well, as for me, like personally, I like it. And what I would like to tell about is what kind of challenges we face, what kind of solutions have we found, and what kind of challenges you might face if you're building your own applications. And yeah, the format of questions, answers, and knowledge sharing. Please feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me, ask a question, suggest your personal story. So let's just do it more interactive and more interesting to everybody. So it's not one way, let's do it bidirectional. Okay, so a couple of words about the company I work for. It is EPAM Systems. It's a global software engineering company. We have around 12,000 people right now working around the globe for a company, and we deliver solutions for quite a bit of big clients. So we recently expanded to APAC, and we have offices in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, in Beijing, and Shanghai. So and a lot of challenging projects, one of which I will present you today here. So that's the brief geography. So if you feel like joining, that's all the locations that you can go to.
You guys are hiring, I think.
Well, yeah, of course we are hiring. Everybody's hiring, right? Who is not hiring? Raise your hand. Okay. So what I'll speak today about: single page application, advantages and challenges, right? So we'll speak a little bit about the advantages, about why we are doing that. And then we'll speak about the challenges. But what is interesting, those things, advantages and challenges, then they make sense only in a particular context, only for a particular requirement and for a particular environment that you are building for. What I mean, I'll give you just a quick example. Like, let's say you're building a single-page web app to build a wine cellar for you and your friends to select the wines for a party. Will this application really need to have high requirements for privacy? I guess not. If somebody really finds out what kind of wine you drink, you won't die about it, right? The same goes for like applications where you don't care about SEO, right? For example, this is an internal application for your company, and you don't really care to show any sort of banners. Then optimizing your app for search engines doesn't make sense. It's not a challenge for you. It's a challenge for somebody else, but not for you. So everything that you hear about single-page app advantages or disadvantages, you should just apply it straight to your particular domain and see if it's really a challenge for you, and then try to solve it, or it is not a challenge, and then you may just ignore it because it's not a challenge. So I'll present a couple of slides to just give you an insight of our domain, of our particular context where we develop application and what we are actually making. Here's basically our stack. So this is an AngularJS application, and you probably noticed that it runs as a full screen, so I don't have this browser canvas, inside of an iPad. So we are primarily building our product for iPad right now, but we are also planning to have the browser version and porting the application for the other devices as well. So the core of this thing is AngularJS, and that's what I will speak about today. That's the challenges that we face and the solutions that we find. The other important component is D3.js. Please raise your hand. Who knows D3.js? Wow, well, that's quite a lot. So yeah, this is a beautiful library for visualizing data, and it builds the data-driven documents where data drives the way that your page looks. So it's super cool. We also use Node.js. Unfortunately, not the whole our server side is on Node.js. Otherwise, it would be even subject for another talk. We have mostly classic stack on Java on the server side. However, we use Node.js for different sort of stubs, mocks, tools that we use during development. And of course, in order to present our web page as a single page app, we need Apache Cordova. This is a thin wrapper that basically wraps your web page in a native application, and you can then distribute it through the application store and have it installed on user's computer as just like a normal application. So a user would not really notice that this is the not the native app, because like browser goes full screen immediately. You do not use alert boxes, right, usually these days. So probably user will not recognize it if you do it good enough. And we use series of supporting stack, I'll call it that way. Jenkins for building, Maven because we are strongly bound to Java these days. Require.js handles our dependencies. Jasmine, you don't go far these days without testing. And JS Hint for the code analysis. We had also two nice libraries that now burn with this beautiful fire. We're getting rid of it. Which is a jQuery. We at some point we found out that we do not need it, and actually we had some problems with it. And PDF.js was a small library that worked as a charm on the desktop browser, and we used it to render PDFs, so it's nice, beautiful articles with custom fonts, everything inside of a browser, until we tried it actually in iPad, where it beautifully crashed a few times with like huge memory consumption, and we ended up implementing the server-side PDF rendering solution to make this a little bit lighter.
Is that rendered inside the Cordova frame, or actually trying to serve it so you could then save the PDF? Like,
no.
I wrestled with that in the past.
Basically, you get the file and then you render it inside of the Cordova frame. Yeah.
But then it's pain to go back, right? There's no easy means to actually go back.
No, it's actually integrated in the page. So you stay in your context. It shows.
The full screen.
Yes, it doesn't open the PDF reader. So that's the trick. And you stay in your context. You can navigate between articles. You can go back, navigate forward. So it's kind of nice, but a bit not yet ready for market, I'd say. So
one other question: with Cordova, do you actually distribute it through the stores, or did you put?
It is not right now distributed through the store.
Through enterprise.
It is still a question. This is a financial application for bank, and that's still a question of how exactly the distribution will happen. So this is not yet distributed.
Or is it for?
Yeah, this is for end users.
Okay, yeah.
So this is like the users.
Licensing is really grey when it comes to that.
Yeah. Please.
Why not Ionic?
Well, the
first of all, we started like a year ago, so it wasn't mature, but I don't think we will go with it now, and the look and feel is completely different from the component that we have defined.
So we immediately we had quite a good prototyping team that could build the really nice prototype in AngularJS, and it also showed the capability of AngularJS to deliver fast changes to the product, because this product is kind of innovative. I mean, you often have to figure out the new ways to interact with the user, the new ways to present data, and it means that the faster you can show the deliverable product, the better you get, right? And AngularJS really shined in that. We haven't actually tried and compared it with Ionic, but AngularJS like fit our needs at that time. Okay, so let's speak a bit about the good parts. So why we're building the single-page web applications and why we're using HTML5 and all this tech in order to do that. Well, first is we are working with open standards, which means that they are evolving as the community evolves. And you can imagine that the capabilities that you are missing today is probably not just your problem. It's probably the problem of other people as well. And as problem becomes bigger, there become some sort of solutions, movements that try to solve that problem. So open standards usually evolve more of like faster and more dynamically than the proprietary ones. So write once, run everywhere. Remember whose slogan was it initially, right? Good old Java. That was the idea. But then we have seen J2ME, which is kind of Java, but not really Java. And then all those Androids and everything. So basically Java failed to deliver that kind of experience. But browsers did not. And finally, the dynamic experience of a user. So this one compares to the classical web pages where you load a page and you go to the next page to reload. Having that context, keeping a user interacting with an application, keeping user engaged with the application, that's what brings the ultimate experience. And speaking about write once, run everywhere, a browser is an ultimate virtual machine that can run everywhere. So just for fun, I Googled, and I think I found a fridge with an internet access and like small applications with Twitter and everything. So if a fridge can run a web page, then I think everything else can. And now let's go to the beefy part, to the interesting one. So the challenges. I'll just quickly outline the headlines of the challenges, and then I'll go through each of them. So if you have questions, just ask per slide. We'll try to address them. And by the way, if you have successful stories on how you solve those challenges, just raise your hand, tell your story. Would be interesting. So architecture is, well, it is the vital part of a big application. Well-written architecture is the good beginning for a project, and poorly written application can just bury a project quite quickly. Stuffing, which is important. If you're working alone or with your friends, with several people, or the project is small, stuffing might not be that critical. However, for that project we have a team. The amount of people now involved is about 50. So this is developers, designers, quality assurance engineers, and we need people to be able to work on that project. Managing the state. So what we usually do when we are in a browser and we want to share something with our friends on Facebook, copy the URL, send somewhere, and the other guy on the other end should open the URL and see the page as it was for you, and see the same things. Memory and performance kind of matters when we go mobile. Tools. The better our tools, the more effective we can develop the things. Security and privacy, specifically for this app, is a royal pain. And search engine optimization and analytics, which is not a problem for us, but might be problematic for single-page apps, worth mentioning. And finally, error handling. So that's our small ring of interesting aspects. Architecture, stuffing, tools, page weight, state, tools. Let's speak about them. So I'll start from architecture. You have two basic options here, right? When you're dealing with the frameworks, you either go for framework or you go for a library. What's the basic difference? A framework gives you an architecture out of the box, which kind of takes away a little bit of your creative freedom, right? As an architect, you kind of want to do it yourself. The other option is a library, which, well, Knockout.js, that's like an example, that does not give you the architecture, however, gives you the means to build that architecture just like you want it. So both options are okay for its own cases. For us, it was important to have the architecture that people can understand instantly, and that closely related to stuffing, which is my next slide. So if you are looking for a developer to work in your project, one thing is to have him introduced to your custom architecture, right? And the other thing is when you see a developer who already knows AngularJS, and even if he doesn't know AngularJS, even if he just knows the basics of JavaScript, he knows the JavaScript core at a very good level, which is, by the way, surprising these days, then he can learn it quite quite fast because there is a huge infrastructure around it, right? For your custom architecture, you are not building that infrastructure because your goal is to deliver the application, not to write the documentation, make the screencasts, and build those kind of things that help people to get involved into the project. And being modular, that is super important for the applications of that scale. When teams do not really have those, hot places in the code, when several people are trying to change the same file, ending up with conflicts in a repository, ending up with like slowing your productivity. Basically, that's what Angular gives at, once again, at a quite good level. So application becomes initially modular by design. You separate out the concerns, you separate out the presentation from the model, from the logic, from the testing part, and it works like a charm. There is also like an alternative, which is AngularJS, which is the same kind of framework that also gives the architecture out of the box. And you can say, well, you can compare the two, and you can't really, well, I will not at least compare here the two frameworks, which one is good and which one is bad, because I will initially be shown with lots of stones and tomatoes. However, I think you would agree that learning curve with Ember is a bit steeper, right? So it's a bit harder to get into the AngularJS than in Angular. Stuffing. So I mentioned that already. When you have a project that is dynamic, that has multiple modules that often evolve in its own paths, it's super important to get people fast and get those people into the project. And the question is, how long does it take for a newcomer to start contributing with a project? And with AngularJS, it turns out that it is very friendly for developers of various levels. So you don't need a team of architects to build a project. You don't need a team of senior developers to build a project. You can quite soon, like after the 2 days training, if the person is not familiar with Angular, he's already able to contribute at a quite good level under proper supervision. It is quite doable. And well, we proved that in practice. So with a team of 50 people, we had our own issues and setting up the workflow at the beginning, but right now it's quite smooth. Now let's speak a little bit about the state, because initially the web pages that we serve from server side, they are stateless. You load the page, you have some sort of a state on the, maybe on a session in a server, but the page itself it loses a state once you load. With a single page application, a state is not only important, it can become quite big and complex, right? So a page might have several widgets in a different state. Some widgets are open, some widgets are not opened. Some widgets display the different data that that they were displayed initially. And the challenging thing about the state is that a user expects that state to be preserved, right? And it's like an obvious desire. So if I reload my page for any reason at all, then I want to see the same picture. So I don't want to be thrown to a login screen and go click through a dozen of pages again to get to the same page. If I send my page link to my friend, I expect him to see the same picture, right? I don't want him to be thrown to the login page. And even if he does get thrown to the login page after logging in, he wants to get to exactly the same state as I were. So managing that state can be a little bit challenging, and preserving that state in the URL might be a little bit challenging as well. And if you add a little bit problems from the real world to that, it might get interesting, right? For example, what happens if a user opens your application in a different tabs, and there is some sort of a server-side associated states? For example, this is a chat application for the sake of, example, real-world example, and the user goes to a certain room, and he has another window opened where he goes to yet another room, so where he is connected to, like managing those things. For example, it's not trivial, so you might think like, whatever, I'll just associate the user session with socket IO session, that's fine. So I'll have two users bound to the single account. There is still applications, at least like during recent releases, Outlook Web Access, if you tried to open your Outlook Web Access in the second tab in a browser, it would give you a message like, I just detected that you have another version of another tab with Outlook Web Access opened in the browser. Please close one of those. Nah, not allowed. Not allowed to read your mail from this and this tab. And you go all through your, like, usually when I work, I have like 25 tabs open in the Chrome with no titles visible. And it's like hell when one of those start to play sound, right? And you go through those tabs finding, oh, Jesus, where's my Outlook? How do I get to my mail? So these things... Huh? Yeah, I'm not that organized. Yeah. So basically those things that might look trivial, sometimes they give you users a pain and harm user experience.
I have a question. Do you persist the state, because you mentioned you use a Cordova wrapper, right? Do you persist it when you reopen itself? I guess that's a different, slightly different challenge. Right?
So for our particular app, yeah, this is the different challenge, but for our particular app, we do not persist the state just because of the security considerations. We ask our user to re-log in and re-enter the credentials once he goes to the application, so not for us. Memory, size, and performance. So with single-page apps, you don't have this, oh, sorry, you do have this problem, because even though devices get bigger and better, memory is expensive, because we were doing testing extensively in Chrome, because we are developing in Chrome. Our environment, just a small side story, our environment is a little bit limited, so we don't have Macs. So we're developing for iPad, but we don't have Macs. We develop on a standard Windows machine, because that's the infrastructure of our client, and we debug in Chrome. So usually it comes as a surprise that you like launch the application, then it goes to, let's say, world map, and it just disappears. Like, what? Did I blink and it just faded away? Was it opened at all? Open again, go to the same page, reload the map, blink, nothing. What just happened? Oh, that's a limited memory in Safari, and garbage collector has just destroyed my application because it thinks it's too hungry. Thank you very much, garbage collection, but I didn't want it. 36 megabytes is not enough for everyone. So memory might be expensive, especially if you're working with devices. And if you're developing a widely accessible single-page application, chances are that somebody will go there with their device and try to open it. Devices are limited. So the speed of rendering and the smoothness of interface is kind of important for the experience. And whenever you're designing that app, you might find that challenging as well. For example, in AngularJS, we had like the main way to navigate in AngularJS. You have the application service, you have the root provider, you click a link, it changes the URL, right? Angular picks that up, moves, and displays the new view, right? So for our application, we wanted to give a smooth experience so that when you swipe the app, you first see the half of the previous view, then the new view comes from the side, and then it smoothly rolls into the screen. So what this means is that for a certain time, we need to keep both views, no matter how rich the data on the views are, right? We need to keep both views visible and accessible. And at that time, the animation might be a little bit sluggish, actually, when AngularJS at the same time tries to get the data from the server, load some charts in D3.js, and retain the old charts on the other page. So might be a challenge. And actually, we were looking into different options, like to pre-render some of the next view that user might come to, right? We were looking into the options of pre-rendering the chart itself, right? And by the way, it's like funny real-life story. When we were like figuring out what was the problem with the performance of one of the pages, you remember that there was a slide with a map, right? With like global things and your money distributed across the world. Like at some point we realized that the map was, what it was about 20 megs of JSON, right? So it was 20 megs of JSON that suddenly just made their way to the project, displaying each small island, like each small curve, each small river in the full map, just for the sake of displaying the big map. So internet is not equally fast everywhere, and I understood this bitter truth after living a bit in China. Especially when you load something from Google CDN or Twitter things, which keeps loading, say, no way, sorry. However, it's get worse if your application sizes are getting bigger. You lose those precious milliseconds when you have a chance to engage your user. So multiple advertising agencies and multiple people did those researches. How much does it take for user to lose interest? And they say that the most precious are the first 100 milliseconds. So after 1/10 of a second, user starts to suspect something. If you fail to deliver your first view and your first engaging experience after a second, that's it. You start to lose users. So that is considered already a bad experience. And that makes you think about some sort of a lazy algorithms, right? Sorry, not lazy algorithm, but lazy loading of components and delivering the content that you can deliver fast. Luckily, for our case, it is not a big challenge. Why? Because we have all our Cordova in place and all our JavaScript is there on device. So user opens up an application and it loads immediately, giving the experience, I think, less than 100 milliseconds. But for general purpose application, it actually might be. Let's speak about tools. We all love to work productively, so that IDEs help us so that you are able to navigate quickly through your code. And basically, tools is the result of popularity of a framework. If a framework is popular, tools give you support. So that is what happened with AngularJS. You have not a bad support in WebStorm, right? Who uses WebStorm? Okay, super cool. So if you use it with Angular, you know that you can click navigate to the right places in your code from HTML. So it's kind of nice. Batarang for debugging. Once again, it has limited use from my perspective, but still kind of nice to have tools. And yet, I think that the tools in the toolbox are missing. And it's not only about Angular, right? It's generally about developing complex applications in JavaScript, right? So the debuggers, the memory profilers, and the tools that help you to solve those really nasty problems, they are actually missing sometimes. And in case of Cordova application, you might sometimes also have those tricky situations, tricky architectures, because what you're actually running, right? Let's speak about memory a bit. What you're actually running is you run a native application with its own memory, its own garbage collector, and inside you are running Safari with its like a small VM inside of VM with its own garbage collection, right? So you might, for example, bump into the situation when the top-level garbage collector will kill the application without knowing that the underlying garbage collection is about to free some memory. So having a little bit more of those tooling, like for a bit more major platforms, like for Java, let's say, is kind of still to be provided to us. But I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, if I compare it to 2008, well, the shift is kind of huge, right? I remember trying to debug things in IS6 when it wasn't working, and I'm debugging into IS6 and thinking, how bad is life? How things are terrible. And somewhere in the middle of the script, I found the line with a comment, this thing is for compatibility with IE55. No, I'm not the most unlucky guy in this world, right? There was somebody before me. So, security and privacy. And, like, there were some challenges that were challenges for everybody but not us, like for the deployment of the application, right? The size of the jars, etc. This is a challenge for us, but not for most of them. Not for most of people. So, what happens here is the application that we deploy is highly sensitive. So the items that application provide are personalized for a particular client. So if you get the article, it means that something is interesting in that article for you, right? There's something in it. If you are getting the data from the server, you are actually getting information about all your money. And you don't want to lose that iPad in a bar. Right, and let the world know what kind of investments you have. And here, like, I'm not only speaking about the transport level security, right? Like, okay, let's do it HTTPS and just forget about it. Or limiting the life of user session, right? If user is not active for, say, sometime let's just kill the session and make sure he's able to he can log in back and he still remembers his password, and it's not some random guy from the street. I'm speaking about more unpredictable cases when, for example, an application crashes and some of the cache is dumped to a hard drive, and in that cache you can have the news headlines that are personalized for you, or some of the pictures or pre-rendered, pre-cached charts that show how well your portfolio does. And here, well, for me, I perceive it as a gap right now, so as a missing standard, if you want. So there are existing tools that kind of do cryptography on the client side. Forge, which is a bit more heavyweight implementation, and Crypto.js, which is a lightweight implementation of client-side cryptography. By the way, Forge provides the TLS, native TLS in JavaScript, so you can build the TLS with Node.js and your JavaScript client. But still, those implementations are done by people, right? By people who, I'm not sure if they are specialists in cryptography. I'm not sure how trustworthy these libraries are, especially after recent Heartbleed things, right? I'm not sure about anything at all in cryptography. How can you trust those? So yeah, so there are ways, there are libraries that evolve, but it is still a gap for improvement, right? And let's speak about this one. Search engine optimization and statistics, which is not a problem for us again, and but might be a problem for somebody else. We don't care about putting banners into our application. We don't care about, well, we care about counting the interactions with the pages, but we definitely don't want to send it to Google. With AngularJS, it turned out that it is quite easy to fix. I mean, you might think, well, so what's the basic problem, right? So with the tools like Google Analytics, you have to embed a little bit of code in your page, and then whenever a client comes to the page, he reloads the page, and that small code lets Google know that, okay, there is some guy with this kind of settings, this kind of browser from that kind of region of the world, he entered your page. But what was a single page application? He entered and that's it. You lost his track, right? Where he is, what he's doing, you kind of don't know. But it is a nice to have feature. It turns out that with AngularJS, it's quite easy to handle this situation, because in Angular you have a central way to tell when the view has changed and when new content loaded. You just listen to this nice event, view content loaded, and then if you use an analytics library, and I've seen the solutions with Google Analytics, you basically manually trigger the analytics call, providing the URL that you want. So Google Analytics accepts this kind of things. For the other libraries, you'll just have to explore a little bit and figure out how to send that request, basically forge the request from your page. For SEO, for search engine optimization, that's basically this problem comes from the same source, right? The traditional web has pages, and Googlebot crawls those pages, gets some information about your site, gets the data about what you're speaking about, etc. With Ajax, what will Google see if it opens your page before AngularJS has loaded? Those templates with curly braces, right? Fantastic. This is probably a site about curly braces, will think Google, right? So it turns out, again, it is still might be a problem if you're targeting all the possible search engines. With Google and Bing, they kind of addressing that issue from their side. So if you change a little bit the design of your URLs, you add a small exclamation marks, it is a sign for a crawler that this website supports Ajax crawling. And afterwards, the crawler will go to your server and actually replace the hash exclamation mark with this thing, escaped fragment. And then you can serve the static data from your web page, especially for the crawler. But then comes the second question, well, how you generate those pages for crawler, because you have all the applications in AngularJS and you're using REST services, right? How to do that? It is not a trivial question. There is no direct answer. Just go to that website and it will do it for you, or there's magic library. But there are some services and libraries that basically do the pre-rendering of your AngularJS application. Just similarly to what crawlers do, but they do it with JavaScript, with Phantom.js, rendering what page has to give at the end, like with all the templates rendered. So, once again, yeah.
I've heard recently Google has starting to crawl and index those JavaScript pages. Of course, it has to be still quite simple, not too complex. But I think they have started a couple of months ago. I think 1 or 2 months ago.
Well,
so they're just starting to do that.
But that's kind of cool news. Well, then probably at some point we will have to we can get rid of this thing, right? Yeah, and yeah, these days you mostly optimize for Google as far as I'm not a sales specialist, but you know, in China, without using Google, it is sometimes a bit hard to find the right information. You start to really appreciate what those guys do.
So you rely on no Google, as in Baidu or something else, or VPN?
Well, it turns out like Yahoo is a bit better. VPN recently, as far as I know, recently it stopped working. So it's getting harder and harder. Errors. The last but not the least, which will be probably a problem for everyone. Just let me sip a Coke. So, whenever you are building the application, what do you want to know about the errors? You want to know two things. What did break, right? And what kind of things led to that kind of break? And with browsers, up until recent time, error handling was all kind of possible flavors, but in no way synchronized, right? So error handling, it's not related now to AngularJS, but AngularJS is kind of helping you with exception handler, right? In AngularJS, if your error has happened in the AngularJS scope, then you can define the exception handler provider and do something fancy. Like, for example, you can send a post request to your server and basically send the text of the error. However, this is just one small mean to handle the error and send whatever browser gave you and whatever Angular gave you in one particular framework. The problem there is a bit bigger, right? So JavaScript, having its asynchronous nature, it's sometimes extremely hard to figure out what was exactly the root cause of the problem. So you find out that you have a stack trace saying that, well, foo.js, that was a callback from dozens of different places, caused an error. What was the steps of the user that he took to reproduce, to basically go into that state and get that error? So as the poor man's solution, you have exception handler in your AngularJS. If you are a little bit less restricted in your resources, you've got, as a good solution for exception handling, you've got a QA team, right? They try to handle it all. And like small library stacktrace.js tries to simulate stacktrace whenever it's not available, or give you if it is available. And there are an infrastructure of tools and services that kind of try to simplify the handling of errors for you. Like track.js, like only a few weeks ago, it was about 2 months ago, there was a nice podcast episode on JavaScript Jabber. They talk about track.js, and basically they explained all the problems that happen with error handling. So I highly recommend to listen to that particular episode. It's quite nice, even though it's a bit focused on track.js itself. So basically, that's the problems of the single-page application that you might encounter in the real world. And not all of those problems will apply to every application. And the fact that single-page apps, they have challenges, right? I don't usually use word problem. Problem kind of sounds bad. It's more like a challenge, because, like, imagine if you would do coding without problems at all. So you come to your work, and you know exactly what you do, and you know exactly what will be the outcome of your lines of code. Would it be interesting? Really, would you really like to do that kind of job? Problems rock, right? So, thank you very much. This is that's it. Thank you. And just before we go to the Q&A part, we are hiring. So we have several open positions in Hong Kong. So if you feel like joining our growing team in Hong Kong or in any other city, let us know. So EPAM people here, please raise your hands. Come to one of us. We're happy to tell you a little bit more about joining us. So thank you very much. So let's do Q&A. Any questions?
I have an unrelated question.
Yeah.
I noticed your domain name at the start is your first name, right?
What?
On one of the early slides, you had your name.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When did you buy that? Because it's pretty rare to have your first name.com.
That's a bit unusual transliteration of my name, but it was like I think 7 or 8 years ago, okay. So it was quite.
So is it a rarish?
Yeah, I think it will be a bit harder to buy it. But there is my last name, which is four letters with IO, which costs about $100-something, and I was thinking, should I buy myself another present for Christmas and have my domain with .io? Sounds right.
Pretty cool these days.
Yeah. So, yeah, please.
I'm curious to learn about how do you organize your file structure? How do you organize get the files? Are you using a horizontal approach or vertical approach? Because I having trouble being modularized by features, I want to learn from you.
So basically, the file organization is kind of important, right? That's a very good question because there are several ways to do that. I'll just give a little bit of background of what kind of problem is that, right? So the first way that you can do is if your application is small, you can put all into the solid files like controllers.js and build all controller there. The second way to organize is to build a folder with controllers and like one controller in one file name and leave all controllers there. What is the problem with this organization is that once you have loads of features, it sometimes gets a little bit harder to navigate between the, to find out which controller relates where, right? So we are currently using the approach per component. So we have a component, and inside of the component we have separately the views, the controllers, the directives, whatever relates to that particular part of code. And well, it works okay-ish. I think, well, the good thing to do right now, and it is still like a technical debt for us a little bit, is to organize some sort of a shared infrastructure, because we are struggling a little bit with the parts of code that are reused by multiple components. So the organization of a shared library is still on our to-do list to build it properly. Thank you. Okay, anything else? I think
we'll have a little bit of time at the end as well for any questions.
Basically, yeah, feel free to chase me. I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have any. And thank you very much once again.
Thanks again.